So Mehdi Hasan sat down for an interview with Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein on his new outlet Zeteo. And I believe the entire interview is paywalled at the moment. So we don't have access to the full thing for you. I would actually love to watch the full thing because I think they probably had a really great back and forth and it got really heated and really interesting. Now, having said that, there are like little snippets that came out, and this is the one that seemingly went viral that everybody's talking about. Mehdi is basically going to press Jill Stein here on her view on Netanyahu and compare it to her view on Vladimir Putin, and kind of hold her feet to the fire a little bit. Let's watch, and we'll break it down.
You haven't done that many posts specifically calling out Russian attacks on civilian areas. You haven't called Vladimir Putin a war criminal, but you have called Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal.
No, actually we did.
Yeah.
In my very first remarks about the Ukraine war, we condemned...
Vladimir Putin's a war criminal in your view.
Yes, we did
and Bashar al-Assad's a war criminal.
Yes, in so many words. Yes, we have said as much. So
you called Netanyahu one, which I think he is.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Is Putin a war criminal?
So what we said about Putin was that his invasion of Ukraine is criminal. It's a criminal and murderous war.
And he's a war criminal who should be on trial.
Well, by implication.
You're struggling here to say something very simple. This is why people have their doubts about you in Russia.
Well,
why is Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal but not Vladimir Putin?
Well, as John F. Kennedy said, we must not negotiate out of fear, and we must not fear to negotiate. So if you want to be an effective world leader, you don't start by name-calling and hurling epithets.
So how will President Stein negotiate with Israel, then, if you've called Netanyahu a war criminal?
Well, because he very clearly is a war criminal.
So Putin clearly isn't a war criminal?
Well, we don't have a decision, put it this way, by the International Criminal Court.
Yes, we do.
For his arrest.
Actually, you're wrong. There's an arrest warrant for Putin. There isn't yet an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. So why is Putin not a war criminal, but Netanyahu is?
Yeah.
I think they both are.
Let me say this. We are sponsoring that war. We are sponsoring Netanyahu.
That's our war.
He is our dog in this fight. That is why we have a responsibility.
No disagreement from me at all. But that does not answer my question.
With Russia, it's
whether
far
we sponsor them or not
complicated.
is irrelevant. Either you're a war criminal or you're not. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
In so many words, yes, he is.
I don't know what so many words are. Butch, is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
Let me say that whatever you think he is, if you want to pull him back...
It doesn't matter what I think. I'm asking what you think. You're running for president.
If you are a world leader, you don't begin your conversation by calling someone a war criminal unless
So why have you called Biden and Netanyahu war criminals?
Because we have a clear strategy and we have a very strong support across
Is Bashar al-Assad and
community.
Vladimir Putin war criminals?
Damn. Look, this is what Mehdi does. Mehdi, no matter who he's interviewing, he's going to hold their feet to the fire, and he smells a little bit of weakness and a contradiction in Jill Stein's worldview, and he's trying to basically snuff it out and lay it bare right in front of her, and he's like, hey, reconcile this. So look, the question is, you called Netanyahu a war criminal, you called Joe Biden a war criminal, is Putin a war criminal? And to be fair, she says yes. There's a little bit of equivocating, and there's the International Criminal Court hasn't necessarily said that yet, so, we don't really know, or whatever you want to call him. But yeah, he kind of is a war criminal, but when dealing with adversaries, you want to put your best foot forward and be open to the idea of peace and negotiation. And so look, what's my take on it? Well, you have to say yes to both. You have to say yes to both because facts and the truth have to override whatever your, ideological predispositions are, whatever framework of the world you want to use for your ideological purposes. That has to be secondary to the actual reality. And look, keep it real. I don't know if Jill Stein falls under this category, but there are plenty of people on the left and on the anti-interventionist right, like the libertarians, who their worldview is, if it's the U.S. or our allies, let's be very, very harshly critical and look into every nook and cranny and break it down as to how we're horrible and we're bad and we've done terrible things, etc., and we commit war crimes, etc. But when it comes to our enemies, it's, we got to be nuanced, we got to be understanding, we got to be reasonable, we got to see it from their perspective. And at the end of the day, a lot of the commentary does sort of feel like it boils down to us and our allies bad, our enemies good, right? And it's sort of like it's like flipping the neocon worldview. The neocon worldview is the U.S. and our allies good, full stop, we're good. Our intentions are good, we mean well. If we commit a crime, it doesn't really count for reasons X, Y, and Z. And our enemies, bad. And dissect what they do 1,000 times a Sunday, call them war criminals, break down every little thing and get into every nook and cranny, etc. And so they really inverted the neocon worldview where it's like America bad, our allies bad, and all of the enemies, well, let's be nuanced, let's be reasonable, let's look for the best in them, let's, soften our rhetoric so that we can have diplomatic negotiations. And I understand that worldview, but again, the most important thing is you got to put the facts first. And Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a crime. It's a crime. And all of the bullshit list of rationalizations and justifications that Putin used, they're just not true. I remember it was an eye-opening moment for me when I listened to Putin's speech right before the invasion. And he really let it all hang out. Yes, a lot of the time he talks about NATO and he thinks there's NATO aggression that's sort of provoking him in this direction and he's just trying to look out and defend Russia. But then there was other portions of the speech where he very clearly laid out, look, what happened with the breakup of the Soviet Union was criminal. And it was the great mistake. I don't think it ever should have happened. And Ukraine is a fake country. And effectively, I want to reestablish the Russian Empire, and that starts with Ukraine. It's not actually an independent country. It's not actually a sovereign country. It's a fake country. It's really part of us. And so we're just trying to get the old gang back together and resurrect some sort of a Russian empire. And that's naked imperialistic talk. Naked imperialistic talk. And so you got to call a spade a spade. Yeah, there's been a lot of attacks against innocent civilians. There has been. This is a war of aggression. The idea, it's solely NATO's fault. Well, let me ask you a question. Did NATO actually invade Russia before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine? Did NATO actually invade Russia? But no, of course they didn't. Putin says, I'm worried that they might, and they're being aggressive, and they're expanding, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, NATO did not invade Russia, and Russia invaded Ukraine. They're the ones who through the first actual blow in terms of real active war, we are illegally invading another country and trying to take territory, right? So here's where I fall in this debate. I would actually say I'm in between the two of them because yes, Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. Yes, he should be held accountable. Same for Netanyahu. I agree with Noam Chomsky when he says every U.S. president post-World War II is a criminal and they would be hanged if the Nuremberg laws were upheld. I don't actually believe in the death penalty, so I wouldn't go that far, but I do think they're all criminals, right? But I understand where Jill is coming from when she says, but I do want to reach peace agreements wherever possible. Therefore, I think it's counterproductive if I call these official U.S. enemies bad names and call them war criminals. But what I would say to her is there's actually not a contradiction between these things. In other words, the facts always have to come first, and you can call a spade, and you can say he's a war criminal. But you could also say, but that doesn't mean we're not using diplomatic negotiations, doesn't mean we're not using back channels, doesn't mean we're not trying to end the conflict. We should still be doing that while also keeping it real. And by the way, some of the evidence you can use to point in that direction, I hate to use this example because I think overall this guy's a neocon warmonger asshole, but look at what happened with Trump and Kim Jong-un. Trump was calling him every name under the book, fat little rocket man and saying my weapons are bigger than yours, etc. Very over-the-top rhetoric. And then ultimately, what did he do? He still went over there, shook his hand, met him, de-escalated. It's one of the few good things I would say Trump did, although he got a lot of shit for it. I totally disagree with the mainstream opinion on that. I think that was the right thing to do. The same thing with negotiating with the Taliban, right? You can call them a terrorist organization. You can call them an Islamist group. You can call them criminals. But then also, we're still working on a diplomatic back channel and we're still trying to resolve this thing the proper way. You can't overlook facts if they're inconvenient. You can tell the truth while also working on trying to fix things. Now, when it comes to Netanyahu in particular, they do have a point that, look, we are arming him, we are funding him, we are aiding and abetting him, we are giving him the green light. So we are more morally responsible for what Netanyahu does compared to what Putin does. We don't arm Putin. We don't fund Putin. He's not one of our puppet regimes. Israel is one of our puppet regimes. Therefore, we're directly responsible to one extent or another for what they do, in the same way that if your child punches somebody in the face, you are more responsible for that than if the kid who lives down the block punches somebody in the face, because that's not your child, right? Netanyahu is. So there is an extra layer of moral and ethical responsibility when it comes to our rabid dogs doing rabid dog shit. right? So I actually agree with them on that. I would just say the biggest problem is that she was equivocating and that she was trying to make it seem like it's more nuanced than it is. No, it's not more nuanced. He is a war criminal. In a world that made sense, he would be locked up. He deserves the same sort of harsh rhetoric that she uses against Netanyahu and Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, you can still point out, yeah, he is a war criminal, but we also live in the real world, so that doesn't mean we should cut off all conversation. That doesn't mean we should cut off all discussion. That doesn't mean we should stop trying to resolve this in a reasonable way. In fact, that's the whole point of being somebody who's on the left and being anti-war, is that you try to resolve these things in the least bad way possible, right? And so there you have it. Again, I just feel like there are some people on the left who need to be careful. Don't simply invert the worldview of the neocons. The neocons are America and our allies good, our enemies bad. And then there is some portion of the left that flips that, and their take is America and our allies bad, and our enemies good. Or at the very least, our enemies, well, it's more nuanced. It's more nuanced, and let's look at the positives, and let's not say mean words because it might hurt a diplomatic process. No, facts have to come first. The reality has to come first. And from there, you can apply your framework and your ideology and try to solve problems. But you got to be willing to call a spade a spade. You got to be upfront about it. And you certainly have to don't make it look like that is your worldview. Our enemy's good, or it's more nuanced and complicated. Us, it's very simple and we're very bad. No, that's not the way to approach it. And, Mehdi did what Mehdi does here. And he is tough. He grills whoever he's interviewing. And he was trying to get at what he saw as a contradiction in the worldview of some folks on the anti-war left. To be fair to her, she did say that he is a war criminal, but there was a little bit of equivocating. And of course, he was like a shark smelling blood in the water, and he went in for the kill when he heard that. So anyway, as I said, it's a good lesson for people who fancy themselves on the left, fancy themselves non-interventionists. I put myself in both of those categories. Got to be very careful not to just invert the neocon worldview and say America and our allies bad and all of our enemies good, or all of our enemies and nuance. It's nuanced. It's complicated. That's way too similar to the neocons than people might think. It's a very unsophisticated, simplistic worldview, and it's not true. And that's why she sort of got tripped up there. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.